Good morning, class. Today is Tuesday, April the 24th. No, that's not right. 27th. Yeah. Today is Tuesday, April 27th. 6, 27, 28, 29, 30. Yes. Today is Tuesday, April the 27th, and today we're going to begin our unit on World War II. As the introduction of my notes tell you, most people, okay, not most people, a significant number of people who become interested in history, all claim to be World War II buffs, and they may be, I guess. And to be honest, I was the same. I developed an interest in learning about World War II, began reading about it. Pardon me. And I don't know why. I list several reasons there in my study guide we'll look at in a minute. But the point of the matter was, well, when did that change? And it did change. It changed actually when I went to Europe, where the great majority of World War II was fought, although a tremendous amount was fought in the Pacific. The change came with the realization that World War II was the worst calamity ever to visit this planet. I mean, 70 million people died in World War II. Even today, the great majority of the countries of the world do not have a population of 70 million. 70 million people, you're looking at the population of Japan or France, totally wiped out. And with that came great destruction of property, immense suffering on all sides, and really a testament to what awful things that mankind can do to themselves. And so, yes, I showed you, I began this class by showing you some ads, some TV ads. World War II was probably the last popular war. And, while it was going on, I'm sure it was less than popular. But then after it was finished, so many people, they're called the Great Generation, the greatest generation, meaning the people who lived through the Great Depression and World War II. And it left this positive legacy that that many people still have yet to fully explain. So I went to Europe and traveled extensively in Germany, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, France, many of the countries that were really devastated by World War II. And I went to cities like Munich, Germany, or Berlin, Germany, or any of the cities in Poland, and saw that, they looked fine now, but that those cities had been totally turned into, I keep saying turned into a parking lot. Turned into a parking lot, totally razed, totally blown to bits, and turned to ash. And while you say, oh, the Germans are bad, well, both sides did that. In fact, as far as the turning cities to ash, the United States and Britain did more of that than the Germans did. Well, anyway, let's get into it, shall we? So, for some reason, many history buffs become history buffs because they, at some point in their lives, develop a fascination with World War II. Why does it happen? And it's an indisputable fact. No other conflict in American history has drawn such fascination in the form of books, movies. Adolf Hitler is probably the most popular book subject. He probably ranks, somewhere in the top 5 in all of mankind. And that list would include Jesus Christ and Mary, and then Adolf Hitler. No other conflict in American history has drawn such fascination in the form of books, movies, series, toys. And yeah, my favorite toy when I was a kid, got it when I was 8 years old, was a Thompson submachine gun. You say, what's a Thompson submachine gun? If you ever watched Saving Private Ryan, say Captain Miller has a Thompson submachine gun. It is a handheld automatic weapon that fired a clip between 20 and 50 rounds. But yeah, 22 caliber ammunition. And, it was so impressive. And so I had the Dick Tracy model. My first cousin had the Marine Corps model that was camouflaged. And for the longest time, every day, my cousin and I would patrol our farm and make sure that it was completely Nazi free. Perhaps World War II, was unlike Vietnam, Korea, the Persian Gulf, and even World War One. Here was a conflict the great majority of the population of the country agreed upon. Perhaps it was because the war appeared to be one of right versus wrong, and the American team seemed to be on the right side. Maybe simply because it was the last conflict in which there was a clear-cut winner, and the United States was on the winning side. So why did the Allies win World War II over the Axis? Was it because God was on our side? Was it because the Americans were on the Allied side, and that turned the tide and made the hapless British, French, and Chinese and Soviets stronger and gave them the boost they needed to win? The words in bold above are an open response question. Regarding the second, third questions, we will hold off on them, but you know what direction we're going with this. We will speak only briefly regarding weapons. But if you're thinking about the ingenuity and superiority of American weapons, actually, this is interesting. I've done some reading on this. The United States only produced 3 superior weapons in World War II. And no, one of them was not the Thompson submachine gun. The German Mauser machine pistol was a much more efficient and hardy weapon. You see, the problem with machine guns is that they jam a lot. And the Tommy gun, the Thompson, jammed a whole lot more than the German Mauser pistol. But yeah, the United States produced only 3 superior weapons in World War II, and you'll never guess what they were. Number one is something you see, I'll guarantee it, every day. It was called the General Purpose Vehicle. It was a vehicle that had a very high wheelbase. It was high up off the ground. It was 4-wheel drive. It could travel at about 40 miles per hour on the open road at the time. It was not built for speed. It was built for strength. And like I said, it was called the General Purpose Vehicle. Or you know how military does things, they just call it like the GP or the Jeep. Yeah. And after World War II, the United States had some 500,000 Jeeps that they basically had, what are we going to do with these things? And they ended up selling them off to a lot of the American soldiers that drove them in World War II because they were very handy farm vehicles. Now, the other thing, the second weapon, the 1.5-ton truck. I was once watching an old Hollywood film called The Battle of the Bulge, which is about the World War II Battle of the Bulge. And they began with, they'd captured one of these trucks, and on it, this German officer pulls out this chocolate cake. I mean, an army that can provide its soldiers with chocolate cake is a well-supplied army. And that was the thing. What a lot of people don't know is that much of World War II, many of the combating nations in World War II still used horses. The United States did not. The United States had trucks and jeeps. And with those trucks and jeeps, they could haul all sorts of material to their soldiers, and they could get them there fast. Not just weapons, not just munitions, but foodstuffs, medical supplies, construction materials, gasoline. The United States was easily the most well-equipped army in World War II because of that. And finally, the C-47. The C-47 was a transport plane, double engine, twin engine transport plane that had a short runway takeoff and short landing distance, and was very good for bringing not only for bringing supplies in and out of a war zone. It was also very good for dropping paratroopers. And the big thing was the United States had tons of these things. Now, when you compare other weapons, for example, the American tank was the M4 Sherman tank. The Sherman tank was, well, I'll tell you what it was. The Germans thought the Sherman tank was the funniest thing in the world. The Germans used to refer to the American Sherman tank as Sherman, they called it Sherman candles. Reason being, the Shermans were powered by gasoline. They had a thin 4-inch metal armor plate, and all you need is a spark. All you need is a spark, and that thing turns into a torch. Yes. And so, yeah. And again, the primary bombing weapon the United States used was the B-17. The B-17 bomber. The B-17 bomber was the primary long-range bomber used in World War II to bomb Germany. Even the soldiers that flew in the B-17 called them flying coffins. They were so slow compared to the German fighters that went up against them. And yeah, they were armed. They had, machine guns all around the plane. But come on, a person wielding a machine gun versus a plane flying some 350 miles an hour, it's no contest. The plane wins every time. And so, in fact, here's a stat that will maybe amaze you if you're interested in this at all. And the stat is this, that the United States 8th Army Air Corps, which was they were the people that flew bombing missions over Germany, the 8th Army Air Corps. The 8th Army Air Corps lost more men flying over Germany. In other words, their planes were shot down out of the sky. Lost more men than, get this, lost more men than the United States Marines lost fighting the Japanese for the entire Pacific War. And, if you wrap your head around that, that's an incredible statistic. And so the point of the matter is that, Allied weapons, American weapons, did not win the war. Except that the one thing about American weapons was this: there were lots of them. Lots of them. The Americans just kept turning them out. And so all the weapons the Americans produced were inferior to the German and their Japanese counterparts. As to why the Allies won, there were 3 reasons, basically. Number one, a guy named Adolf Hitler. He insisted on directing German strategy, and he was terrible. It's a reason why his own generals tried to kill him toward the end of the war. He was getting German soldiers killed. He never got along with many of his German staff officers for the very simple reason that Adolf Hitler was not German. Adolf Hitler was Austrian. And most of the German staff officers in the German army, the German military, most of them belonged to a landowning class called the Junkers, Junkers. The Junkers were the landowning class, and these guys, these officers, their fathers had been officers in the German army, their grandfathers had been officers in the German army, their great-grandfathers, in fact, all the way back to the Middle Ages. These guys, these Junkers, had held positions of authority in the German army. Now they were being asked to take orders from a short, sawed-off Austrian son of a paper hanger. And it didn't go over well. The second thing, Adolf Hitler made the blunder of attacking the Soviet Union. the Soviet Union was such a large country, and it's very difficult. It stretched the German line of supply so very far. And on that, the Soviets were a determined enemy. There's no saying it is easier to kill 10 Russians than to capture one. And yeah, and that's what the Germans were up against. Just to talk about Stalingrad, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, in Stalingrad, Adolf Hitler insisted on one army, the German Sixth Army, going into Stalingrad, capturing it. But then, when the army was surrounded by Soviet forces, Hitler would not let them retreat. 550,000 men went into Stalingrad. 550,000 German soldiers went into Stalingrad. 2 years later, 90,000 surrendered. And of those 90,000, after the war, they just didn't let them go home. They were sent to Siberia. And 10 years after the war, 5,000. 5,000 out of 550,000 of those soldiers were allowed to come home. The final reason the Allies won is truly it had to do with the Americas. Yes, and that is simply this. If you look at a map of the United States, it's easy to see. All the other countries involved in the war, the major powers, Germany, Britain, Japan, Soviet Union, all of them had to contend with the fact that they faced bombing raids on a fairly regular basis. Bombing raids that destroyed their factories, that interrupted their lines of supply. The United States didn't have to worry about that. Yes, the longer the war went on, the stronger the United States became militarily because it could produce weaponry, not only more weaponry, but they could produce weaponry at a increasing rate. The longer the war went on, the faster they produced weaponry. By the end of the war, the United States was turning out one battleship and one aircraft carrier per week. By comparison, anything the Japanese lost after Midway could not be replaced at all. That is a tremendous advantage. World War II was unmatched in its cruelty. Soviet armies conquered Poland and Germany and raped, pillaged, and deported millions in property back to their country as spoils of war, and that is true. Yeah, it's not like after the war was over, everybody said, okay, good game, guys. Let's all go home. Shake hands. No, there were lots of people. And we'll talk about that at the end of the chapter. British and Americans dumped millions of tons of bombs. Oftentimes, the bombs were incendiary. That means that when they were dropped, Mr. Likens, the bombs exploded into flame on civilian, and they dropped on civilian populations. And the British and Americans knew there were civilian populations. Napalm, yeah. Then there was a dropping of the A bomb on Japan, which unleashed unprecedented damage and started the nuclear age. Yeah, can anybody say North Korea? And finally, of course, what the Nazis did to Jews, gypsies, people with mental and physical challenges, homosexuals, communists, dissenters, is well documented, and we will discuss that in great detail. And I have pictures. And so I'm going to stop here. But yeah, welcome to World War II. Thank you.